Good afternoon, everybody. It's Tracy Abbott from Microlink. Delighted to welcome the lovely Jodie Greer from Be People Smart. We're going to have a really in-depth look at the actual app that she's got that helps the maturity model for you to move your businesses forward in becoming disability confident. We're going to have I don't know what's wrong with my teeth today. I do apologise. I'll put them back in. We're actually going to do a question first to find out which area of business you are most interested in looking in depth at. So I don't know if you can run the poll for us, please, Azadeh.
Sorry, Tracy, do you want me to run the first poll?
If you can do, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Here we go, guys. So which of these areas is most important to you? And that's a single choice. So the built environment, communication and customer services, digital solutions, diversity, equality and inclusion, health and safety, learning and development, procurement and supply, recruitment, travel and relocation, workplace adjustments. So if you can put down just one of those, which areas is most important to you, because I really want Jodie to give us a deep dive. Jodie, while that's going on, can you say hello and introduce yourself?
I certainly can. Hello, everyone. I have also got a little slide with a little emoji of me, but I'm Jodie Greer. I am the CEO and founder of Be People Smart. And for those who don't know us, we're a consultancy who provide disability inclusion and accessibility services end to end.
Wow. And what got you on the journey?
Well, so I spent 24 years in the corporate world, and the last 13, it's probably no secret to those that know me. So the last 13, I was at Shell, and I spent over a decade leading the Disability Inclusion Network, helping to launch them in a dozen more countries. And wow. Because I spent 20 years in property, my accessibility journey actually started in the built environment, doing some real robust audits of our sites. And then I moved into a dedicated global accessibility lead role and got far more involved in all accessibility, certainly digital. But one of the things I was also a real key part to was launching a global workplace accessibility process, because of course, you definitely need to design with accessibility in mind, but it's never one size fits all. So you need to make sure we can make those adjustments. And I'm preaching to the converted, Tracy, but that was another big part of my puzzle that I was really keen to get right.
I think it's a really important thing to mention right at the front. This is a free resource that Jodie's designed. And here we look, the D&I.
Interesting.
Fabulous. D&I and recruitment, nothing on the built environment. So we've got a lot of D&I people and recruiters on the call, I would suspect. That is wonderful. It's certainly things that we can dig into in more depth to actually show you how this works and how straightforward it is. I've seen an awful lot of different types of maturity models, and I absolutely love Jodie's. It's really not quick to do the work, but it's quick to assess where you're at. I think it's fair to say, isn't it? And I mean, yeah. You've designed it with some lovely little emoji faces there, which I quite like.
Yeah, so give a quick visual. The image for the disability inclusion maturity model is a set of steps, and they're 1 to 5 because they're the maturity levels, and they start with a sad face, then a straight face, a smiley face, a grinning face, and then a grinning face with stars for eyes.
Okay, so who's at number 5?
I don't know if anybody's at number 5, possibly in certain business areas, some organisations would be. But also, and we'll come on to this, but it's really important that organisations recognise that actually you may never reach 5s in any or in all areas, but actually that's okay. And that's not a cop-out, because we're not for cop-outs, but actually depending on your industry, depending on the way your organisation is structured or the business you do, you may not reach 5s, but 4s are absolutely to be celebrated. And I believe everybody can get there. If they put some time and energy into making sure that the way they're actually working is inclusive and accessible.
it's fair to say an awful lot of companies, both you and I have seen, are probably at number one.
Yeah, that the truth is that I would say that's probably the case in a lot of places. And the thing is, people wouldn't even necessarily recognize it, because what does that mean? What would make you a number one? What makes you that sad face? And how do you start smiling? What does it look like to actually mature? And that's where the model comes in. So I'm trying to change my screen and it's not playing ball.
You got a lot of technology. We were talking a bit earlier about how much of a Luddite I am, and Jodie's had some really interesting challenges with her IT recently. So perhaps you could give us a little bit of an idea of the kind of things that you're asking people to have a look at. Oh, there we go.
That was my introduction, but I've already done that. So I'll skip over that one.
Yes.
So this is the what. So I don't know if anyone's following me on LinkedIn, but if you are, I said I'll share the what, the whys and the hows. So the what was creating a disability inclusion model with helpful and usable guidance, with additional business areas to those that were already available, more granular detail. So I'll come on to some of the feedback I'd seen previously and what I've heard from different business leaders and D&I leaders, was that you look at a lot of maturity models and there's, maybe 4 or 5 bullet points in a space, but what else is there? Like, is that it then, or do I have to think about anything else? So it was making it a lot more granular with a lot more detail to remove the guesswork. Making it fit for a global audience. So I was very lucky, and Tracy was part of this, but I had a fantastic global review panel of people from disability inclusion and accessibility professionals from around the world, because I wanted to make sure that although it's only offered in English, it is free, that it's translatable, that it actually works for everyone in all sectors, different sizes of business, and as I say, different geographies. So yeah, suitable for all sectors as well was another key thing for me, because I wanted to make sure that we're getting rid of the barriers, and that was a big thing about it. The whys. So this was about feedback that I got for years, and I just didn't have the scope to create something off my own back when I was back in the corporate world. And so when I took the leap and created Be People Smart, it was one of the first things I wanted to do. And I spent a year of my life, got to know the review panel really well, but I spent a year of my life building this, because the things I kept getting was, how do I fit this into my global business? Because a lot of them don't seem to work if you're trying to kind of compare apples and different, buildings and different working practices around the world. What about the other business areas like health and safety? That was something that kept coming up, that there was areas that weren't covered. We aren't ready to join a membership organisation, so how do we assess our maturity? That was another thing around cost, because people were maybe a little embarrassed if they felt like they needed to just start now. And so how do they kind of do that? Which is another reason it's not just free. We don't know you're using it. You do just download it. Oh, now I'm changing without even trying. So I see some points, but what else do I need to consider? This is something I've mentioned earlier about people not really understanding what else that maturity really looks like. And my business can't get to full maturity in all areas, will always fail. That's another big thing. Yeah. It is recognizing who you are, what's realistic for you, but as I say, not as a cop-out, but what is realistic for your business, so you can be the best version of yourselves.
I think that's really important, Jodie, because we talk a lot about this within Microlink and during the workplace adjustments that we do, because it touches on these same business areas, and you have to make adjustments to make workplace adjustments. So it's really important that you're working with something like your maturity model, that you're working with something like Microlink, so you can actually mesh the two, because otherwise, if you just pick one, well, you actually, no, that's not true. You could pick just one area, start in one area, because I think sometimes it could be overwhelming, couldn't it? If you went to all 10 areas and went, whoa, let's look at all of these, because that's a lot, particularly if you're quite a big company. But what if you were starting, we had on that poll, D&I as one area and recruitment as another area that people would like to look at. Can you do a bit more of a deep dive perhaps in those, so we can take people on a bit of a journey to show them how straightforward it is just to get the answers to some of these things, to know where you are. Oh, look, here we go, the how.
So yeah, no, but we will absolutely do a deep dive. And what I'm hoping, I'm going to literally start from the beginning as to how to navigate to it, some information around
Wonderful.
the guidance that's provided, and then we can actually dive in. And the reason I want to start right from the beginning is I'm hoping if you're listening to my dulcet tones, you can actually follow with me. So for anyone who wants to actually, you know, follow along, make sure you can download it, all of those things, you can actually follow with me and we can do it together. I'm really excited actually that it was 2 areas I wasn't expecting to come up as the highest ranking, because recruitment's something I was really keen to share. But it was really exciting to see that the DEI space came up so heavily, because of course we often talk about it, but it's one, making it real, and 2, making sure that disability isn't at the bottom of that D&I ladder and that we're bringing it up. So yeah, the how, kind of mentioned it already, but my brain power of over a decade of learning, I can't pretend the year I spent on this did give me some physical headaches, because you kind of start going numb and then you start changing and changing. The lived experiences of hundreds of disabled people, truth is, that's where pretty much most of my knowledge comes from, the absolute vast majority. But the most powerful knowledge I have, because of course, you know, it's real people that build these things. On the screen, we've actually got the Be People Smart personas, another free resource, which are built out of real people stories. And as I've said already, with the support of our wonderful global review panel, which was a lifesaver. So let's take a look.
That's a bit of a freaky slide, Jodie.
I'll be honest, I pulled the slides together this morning and I was trying to think, what do I put on there? So I just decided to go with eyes. Purple eyes. So if anyone wants to follow along, you can also watch if you're happy to, but if anyone wants to follow along, if you go to bepeoplesmart.co.uk, you will come to our homepage. I'll only pause for a second just to give people a chance to get into their web browsers. If
Yeah,
do
have a look while you're going through it, because I think it's a really key feature that it's so straightforward to use. You've not only got the tools and resources that Jodie's put in there, but she's given you guidance on how to use the tool as well, which quite frankly, for most of us, it's going to be really life-saving.
So tools and resources, the first thing that comes up is the disability inclusion maturity model. I mentioned our personas, also free. They're also there. You can use their stories to help you progress and to, you know, share those communications with your colleagues, etc. So if you click on the disability inclusion maturity link, you will come into the guidance. Now, the reason the guidance takes you all the way through before you actually get to the button to download the model is to give you that real overview, to make sure that, you know, you're happy with where you're going and that you've kind of got a bit of hand holding before you go in. So we'll go through this a bit briefly, but of course you can take the time to read it for yourselves. Once you're comfortable with this, anytime you need to launch the model, then of course you can scroll down and select the purple button. But effectively, as we've said in all the adverts for this session, is that it is about assessing where you are right now with your disability inclusion maturity, identifying where you want to be, and also how you get there. And some of the key things, I'm probably ad-libbing what's already written here, but some of the key things are, Tracy mentioned about you might want to look at particular business areas. That's also something you can do, because you can do it in silos, even if it's as a pilot, for instance, for your organisation. The one caveat to that I would always say is to be a little bit careful about the synergies. So for instance, if you were looking purely at recruitment, then things like workplace adjustments come into play, because you need to be able to make the adjustments for people at recruitment stage. Even things maybe like communications, because, you know, how are you actually creating the materials that you're sharing with candidates? So just be kind of aware of that if you select individual business areas. So I've talked to you a bit already about how and why we created this model. So I hope I'm not making anybody's eyes go funny when I scroll down. And then we get to getting started. So as it says here, walk before you run. It does say metaphorically. Don't feel you should be at a maximum score of 5. And I keep saying that, I know, but it's really important. So this model can be, and long term, I'd love to see it be a great benchmarking tool, but everybody's got to start somewhere. So don't get hung up on what, you know, your peers, your competitors are doing. If you're moving in the right direction, then you're winning. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Improvements are improvements. Team effort. It's really important that there is collaboration with these things, particularly for this, because there are 10 business areas listed. So what we suggest is that there is a coordinator role, so someone who can take some overall ownership for the organisation to kind of pull it all together, particularly when it comes to being able to do that high level stakeholder engagement to make sure you've got the materials to share. So get someone with the necessary knowledge and the senior level support for each of your business areas to complete their scores. They need to know their business area. They need to understand what they've actually got to be able to share that. So accountability is key. We talk about, you know, agreeing timelines and things. It's probably nothing new really. It's like any kind of project, but it's just making sure that people are actually committed to assessing and sharing. So if ways of working are consistent across your organisation, then it's actually quite easy to put the scores together for the entire company. However, if you've got differences because maybe, you know, local legislation, different recruitment laws, you may well want to appoint different representatives for different locations within a business area. We do absolutely recommend, and this comes across for all inclusion, but we certainly recommend securing executive level support within each business area so that they do give, you know, that kind of time and that energy, that they respect it and that they absolutely support it. So depending on the structure of your organisation depends, you know, how many sponsors you may feel that you need. So your current scores. So we'll show you what the model looks like and how to go through it, and you can keep track. So what's interesting is if you're firmly between 2 scores, we really advocate for you to give yourself a 0.5 on top. Because if, for instance, you know, you think, oh, we're not quite at a 3, but we've done some really good stuff, we're heading there. Are you a 2.5 then? Hand on heart, 2.5? Absolutely, it shows progress. And I think those half scores are really important for you to be able to demonstrate where you're going. And I'll show you what that looks like in the model as well. So if your assessments are by location and you want to know how to, you know, calculate them across the whole organisation, then these are the options you have. So based on the lowest score, I only recommend that for mature organisations, because if you've already really delved down this road, then it gives you a chance to just recognise where you need to put more effort in. Average score is what we recommend for the majority, because it helps you kind of give credit where it's due, but also it is important that you don't lose track of where real improvements needed, you know, where there are those lower scores being found. And based on maximum scores, we never recommend that, I've got to be honest, because you're kind of giving credit to one particular space, but you could lose track quite easily of, you know, where maybe you haven't got such an equitable experience for people. So pretty much this gives you the criteria for your scoring. Then we talk about target scores and what to aim for. I won't go on about it again, but you don't need to be a 5. And it also talks about prioritising, you know, how are you going to prioritise which business areas? Are you all priorities for the moment? And that's going to differ by every single company. And that, again, is absolutely fine. There's only so many hours in a day. Flag what score you want to achieve and when you're going to achieve it by. What's your goal? Take action. Sounds obvious. But it's, you know, how do you actually collate these actions? Who's doing what? And it's just a little bit of guidance around that. I can share that there is a license on the model. You are absolutely free to use it, as I say. It can be used commercially. So we're even giving other consultants carte blanche. But part of the reason for that is to make sure it can actually be used globally as well. And of course, we're in very different commercial markets sometimes to people that need these tools. So it's just free to everybody. And then the magic button that says access to disability inclusion maturity model, as if by magic. So I'm going to click on the download file button at the top.
Can I just interrupt you, Jodie? Sorry, this
Yep.
is Anna from Microlink, just in the background there. We're having an issue for some reason with the captioning. Could I just ask you, is your Interact Streamer microphone on?
Yes.
It's not picking up what you're saying. We're just trying to work out what the issue is, because we have Lydia Best on the call, and she's deaf and she can't follow it. I'm watching the transcript, Lydia, so I'm not quite sure. I have written it to her, but I'm just wondering if your microphones are on. All right, I'll go away in the background.
Can you hear me, Anna? Can you see me on the captioning?
That's strange.
No, it's not typing now. So it is picking up Jodie. Maybe it's not picking up Tracy.
Right, let me have a check on mine.
Yeah,
Lydia,
I don't know what's
sorry.
going on. I'm sorry. I do apologise. It's a technical issue and we can't work. We are working on it. Anyway, I'll go away in the background.
No, thank you. It's important that, of course, as, you know,
well,
people have taken the time.
Yeah, and we're talking, we're all about accessibility.
We are all about accessibility.
So all our webinars are usually fully accessible, but for some reason we have a glitch in the matrix today. We are trying to sort it out though. So
thank you very much, Anna. Sorry, Lydia.
No problem. Yeah, I'll write to her. I'll write to her because she's deaf. So all right.
Sorry, Jodie, do you want to crack on?
Yep. Sorry, I was just reading the comments then, because I'm obviously not tracking because I'm sharing. So at the top here, there's an enable editing button, and that means that you can play with the model. Okay, so what you'll see at the front page, if you've looked at any other maturity models, this is probably going to look similar to most, in a sense of you've got different business areas, you've got an overview, and you've got kind of, you know, this overview of what it means to be a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, a level 4, and a level 5. What's also on this sheet is where you can make your own notes. So your current score, your short-term target, we often say, like, you know, the next year end, your long-term target. So this is for you to determine, and any notes and things. This sheet can help you with creating your materials to share with your senior leaders and your other stakeholders, so that you've got something kind of high level that is digestible for the masses. So that's what you often see for a maturity model. However, this is where this one does differ, because, and I'm going to go to DEI first because it was the highest score. This is what it looks like when you go in. So if you go through these specifics, so for instance, here's one that says, no visibility of senior leaders with disabilities. If that's you, you say, yeah, that's us. If it's not, you say no. There is a not applicable, and what it does say in the guidance that I didn't explicitly share is that not applicable isn't a cop-out. I keep still using that term. But not applicable is absolutely there for a purpose. I'll give you an example. If you only have a single story building and in the built environment, it talks about staircases, you haven't got any, then of course it's not applicable. But there may be things for your sector that really aren't ever going to exist. So it's just about being true to yourself and answering honestly. So you go through here and you start answering the yes, no's or not applicables. And then basically you assess, where are you heavily at a yes, and have you answered yes in every area of that maturity level. It does give you in the guidance how to kind of work out your score if you're split across the different levels. So I'll just give you some examples because it might just help resonate a little bit. So at level 2 here, so also actually I probably should have said they've got titles on them. So the levels from 1 to 5 go from disabling to intent to strategic, enabling, and then leader. And the other reason I use those words is because some of the feedback on other maturity models was the wording used between 1 and 5, things like informal and formal, I didn't really know what it meant. So I was trying to make it really clear and really intuitive. So here under 2, which is intent, are things like disability inclusion is explicitly referenced in the DEI strategic plan. If we go down and look at something under 3, you have disability networks or employee resource groups are in place with funding in primary business locations. That's another example. And number 4, I can't see questions, by the way, Tracy, so please do prompt me if there's
I am having a look as we're going down. Yeah.
Number 4, an example is the end-to-end process for feedback management includes direct response to the instigator where possible. So obviously there's points in here about being able to provide feedback, and it's also making sure that there is some reciprocal process. And with being a leader would be things like disability confidence training isn't just given, but it's refreshed for all employees annually. So this is why I say, you may determine that depending on, your resource, that's not actually feasible for you. I've got to be honest, that part, not really sure why it won't be, but yeah, that's why you need to make those calls for your own business. But that gives you a kind of very high level overview of the 1 to 5 model and how it looks. Now, what I will show you is when you've determined your score, sorry, I have to move our faces out of the way on my screen. When you've determined your score, you can put it into here. So say we're at 2. And when you put it in, it will show you that you are, because you can say when you did them. Sorry, I'm flicking my screen, aren't I? You can say that you're a 2, and it will ping up and show you intent. And again, if you're creating this in a sort of central area where people can access and see what's going on, when was it last assessed and where were we, you can see things like this. So if you sort of think, 2, we've got intent, we need to do better. If you look at next time and you're actually a 2.5,
ooh,
then it will show you that you're at intent, but you're progressing. You are making change. You are improving. So that's just to help, because it matters. You're taking the right steps. So I think that's really important. I will move on into recruitment as well to have a little look. But before I do that, I just want to check if there's any comments or questions so far.
I mean, this is one of the areas that people really wanted to dive into. So all you people that are listening in that are in D&I, has Jodie answered the questions? Have you got any specific questions you'd like to ask about what we're going through? I mean, I think for me, what I really like is that, 1, it's free. I'm going to keep saying it's free because that's fabulous. You put a lot of effort, a lot of sweat equity into it. Jodie obviously does consultancy work off the back of this if you need help in actually getting this done, which is great. But it's a living document. I love that. I love the fact that it tells you that there's progress going on, because I love a tick box. I do, but it has to mean something. So the fact that you're actually getting that pat, I think we talked about it before, didn't we? When you're driving along, and I'm a bit of a fast driver, shall we say. I love it when I go through and they get the little green smiley face when you actually go under the speed limit. It's really satisfying, and you're feeding into this, and I really like that. Let me just see. I think we may have a question on here. As we said, we've got a lady. Can you ensure that this is sustainable? We're going for a disability confident leader, but I just want to make sure we can retain.
So yes, I would absolutely say this actual model. I know I give you this for free. This model will be reviewed and refreshed where necessary on an annual basis. One of the things in the guidance is actually how you can register with us your use, so we can tell you what's changed.
We've also got, sorry, carry on, sorry.
No, it's fine, because I think that's really important, that we want to keep it evergreen, but how do we enable you to do the same? But we don't want to just say, there's a new version, go and have a look, because there's a lot of data in here. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to do your bit.
Thank you. We've got a question from Gabrielle Cockburn asking, is the score based on the colour with the most yeses?
Yes. The reason I say that is it's not always quite so black and white, and there is some information in the guidance. Maybe I should have talked a bit more around it. So effectively it is the most yeses. But for instance, if you're talking about maturity, and so you may have had quite a few yeses in your level 3, but you haven't actually achieved them all, then can you honestly say, because this is you're scoring you, but can you honestly say you're at a 3, or does that make you a 2.5 and you know what your improvement spaces are to get to a true 3? I would always say you'd be a 2.5 then, and by taking those extra steps, you do get to a 3. Don't forget, if you go through this and you actually find, for instance, there might be something at level 5 that you're doing, but the rest of you looks like you're at a level 3. Don't lose track of that. And when you're sharing your comments and you're sharing what you've done with your stakeholders, let them know that. Let them know where you're sat, but you've already taken extra steps that can help you reach even leadership level of maturity. And, you know, these are the kind of actions we need to take in between to get there. Because I think credit where it's due, it needs to be celebrated.
I think it's important to remember as well that nobody else sees this. Jodie can't see it at her end of the screen. This is a tool for you and your businesses. Kelly Miller said this page looks a great place to start in order to assess the business and set up an action plan.
Thank you. That's exactly what we're aiming for. And these explicit points are aimed at giving you the sort of basis for that action plan. I will honestly say the reason we give guidance to get people involved in these business areas to be kind of accountable for the assessment is because it's really difficult if you don't work in a business area, but you've been appointed, for instance, to try and work out, do we even have these things? And hopefully, if you're really mature, you'd have it really visible anyway. But the reality is your ways of working aren't always really clear to other people in your business. So it can be really tough to be, for instance, I don't know, someone in marketing who's been asked to assess the built environment as well and make sure that you've got all the right things in the right places. You know, that's a task in itself.
It surely is. Alyssa Harvey, apologies. She said neither captioning nor transcript is working now. I really don't know what the issues are. I do apologize. We will send out the videos and slides from this session. Obviously, we would like everybody to be able to access it equally. I mean, that's what we are as a business. So humble apologies for that. Gabrielle Coburn's come back and says that makes a lot more sense. Thank you. Around the colouring, which we mentioned earlier. I think there was another question I'd missed on there.
Yeah, sorry about this. We have no idea what's happened to Enter Extreme. It's now turned into Persian. So what we're going to do is this session's being recorded. We will add captioning afterwards and we will distribute to everybody. So you will be able to watch this back again. So apologies, we are at a loss.
In the interim, are we able just to turn on Zoom captions?
We are trying to do any kind of captioning. We don't know what's going on. It's almost like we have to all log out and log back in again. But anyway, as I said, we will resolve this afterwards. So we can't work out what's wrong at the moment. Anyway, just carry on because there's a lot of people who can hear you.
Can I just check that that's been put into the chat so that anyone who was relying on captions is fully aware of what's going on and where we're at?
I am answering as many of the questions as I can. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think one of the things as well I wanted to look into, you're looking at the Disability Confident Leaders stuff. This very much maps into that, doesn't it? It's very much a tool that you can use if you're on that disability confident journey, which again, we try and urge people and promote disability confidence. We're disability confident leaders ourselves at Microlink. And again, to be fair, Jodie, I mean, I've worked with you on the recruitment section, but hadn't seen all the other bits. But when I went through it, it's really straightforward. And it's amazing how many things when you think that you're on the right path that you have forgotten about. And when you look at this, it's like an aide de memoire. And I love the ability to go, oh, crikey, yes, I do need to do that. But you are scoring your own homework. Is there a danger of somebody going, yeah, we're all right at that?
There's always a danger of that, let's be honest. I think there's always a chance that someone or an organisation will feel they're better than they are. And we'll also potentially, because if someone shared how well they're doing, and if they then assess and recognize, oh, we're not doing as well as we thought we were, it's that red face test. And if there's a bit of embarrassment involved, are they going to be willing to kind of stand up and say? But I actually think there's a lot of strength in that. I think there's strength in the fact to say, we've always taken steps to be fully inclusive. We've always taken steps to be disability inclusive. We've now done an in-depth assessment of exactly where we are. We are aware of our gaps, and we're improving further because we want to fill them. I think, it's how you kind of share that message. So it doesn't need to be an embarrassment. The fact you're doing this, and the fact you're willing to want to improve, to want to mature, and to want to put an action plan together that's, tangible and worth having, then it should be celebrated.
I agree. But take, for example, the DEI area is probably one of the ones that gets kicked the most within business, that has to justify their being the most in business. Are they potentially leaving themselves open to saying, oh, crikey, some of our actions on here are disabling? Are they maybe making themselves vulnerable, or do you think there's strength in that?
I think there's strength in vulnerability, but I do also think that, yes, it may be, if you're a D&I leader and all of a sudden you have to say that one core strand of your business area is certainly not where you would have liked it to be, then you do kind of have to just, put your hand up, take it on the chin a little bit and say, we've had so much pressure. We've had a lot of stuff going on. We've got gender pay gap pressures. We've had Black Lives Matters that we wanted to make sure that we were really, vocal about the fact of our sort of anti-racism protocols, etc. And the reality is, whether we like it or not, disability inclusion in absolute vast majority of organisations has never, ever had that same power put behind it. And so, people do feel the pressures. They are kind of, enforced, encouraged, whatever, to have core priorities. And now is the perfect time to be able to say, look, this is a massive demographic for us. This is 19% of working age adults. That's 1 in 5 people. So yes, we are now really active. We are determined. We want to be disability confident, and we're seeing how we do that. Whether you choose to use the term disabling when you share, let's be honest, I probably wouldn't. But you know where you're at, and you know that the fact of the matter is, if there's an awful lot of the way you're doing business that is disabling, you know how you change that. What you can share is, we're becoming disability confident. We've got an action plan. We are making moves. We would love your input. That's a positive message, as long as, of course, you follow it through.
It's got to be a winner, hasn't it? Can we go on to the recruitment? I'm quite keen to see it. I've not seen it since we reviewed it a few months ago.
It's so funny. I feel like a proud parent, like showing
showing
photos of my children's first day at school.
Well, you might have just seen my little puppy as I was trying to. You know what it's like when you're at home with a very small child? Well, I don't, but I've got a very small blind puppy who's just eaten my post, and I'm trying to stop her from choking on it while we're talking. It's been quite challenging.
So to keep the model as simple to use as possible, for those that can see the screen, you'll probably realise already that every single, obviously the content is different for the criteria, but every sheet for every one of the 10 business areas is pretty much identical. It's because I wanted to make sure that everyone, you know what you're getting. If anyone needed a bit of help on anything, everyone's on the same plane.
They're all talking the same language, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly that. So what you will notice is some are much longer than others. And I won't pretend the built environment, because of the complexities of a built environment, is probably the longest, or is the longest by far. But they're all thorough. They've all had an awful lot of input to make sure that we're really capturing the vast majority. It does say in the guidance, this isn't finite. There's always other things that will crop up. There's other things to consider, but it's a really good starting point and progress plan. So for recruitment, Tracy, if there's any key points that you can see that you want to pick up on, please do, because I know this is your baby as well. But for instance here, disabling says there's no budget in place for reasonable adjustments or accommodations for instance, a sign language interpreter?
I so wish we'd had one of those here today. It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because there are so many different ways of making things accessible for people. It's just really highlighting what is available. The cost for these sort of things are normally not very high at all, but the cost of getting it wrong can be hugely high.
What I would say as well, I think sometimes there is a misunderstanding of cost and people are surprised at how inexpensive these services can be. But also the reality is people in recruitment may well have good intention, but as an organisation, do you have the vendors in place? Like, do you understand what the process is and who you can book through? And that's where, when I talked about the synergies and the kind of overlaps with different business areas, that's where it also comes into play, because you don't want your recruitment teams using one person for sign language interpreting and someone else for live captioning. And then, you know, you've got your communications team using someone else to do the same services for webinars. You don't get the same leverage there either. So that communication between teams is really, really important to get it right.
Yeah.
Another example here under intent, line managers and or recruitment personnel are given guidance and learning on the value of diversity and inclusion and how to make required adjustments. So again, this comes back to how to, but also things like whether we like it or not, and we hear the term a lot now, there's unconscious bias in all of us. And human beings, and we could touch on AI because it is in here, but human beings are doing the recruitment and human beings will have built-in thought process. And so if someone does come along and very openly shares a health condition or a disability, it's all too easy for that default to be, oh, wow, that could be like hospital every month. Might not voice it, but it's too easy to be a thought process. So it's flipping that narrative around and getting people to recognise the value. And I don't just mean having a diverse workforce, that's valuable in itself, but also, for instance, the added skill sets that very often come because of a disability, because of overcoming adversity and finding smart ways of working, of being creative, particularly because you're neurodiverse, all of these things that come with it. It's teaching people all about that stuff so that that's in their minds when they start talking to people and not thinking about absenteeism, which is actually often a fallacy anyway.
Yeah, we've got a question from Kelly Miller saying, I believe the government also provides grants and funding for applicants. I presume you're talking about access to work.
Yes, what
Kelly.
I was thinking.
Yeah. What can you tell us about access to work, Jodie?
Well, in actual fact, for applicants, that's not so straightforward because access to work is easier once you're in employment. So I'll be honest, I won't pretend to be the expert, but once you're in work, there are certainly financial support you can get, for instance, for transport, be that taxis, for equipment. From experience, larger organisations don't really tend to use it because, of course, they do have the budget to be able to fund the adjustments people need. They just need to understand what that looks like. But yeah, there is absolutely the service there, but I won't pretend to be the expert on it because when it comes to recruitment, I'm not actually sure how easy it even is to get that help.
It's not too difficult as long as you have a process in place. So as Jodie said, if you're the type of company that's really open to employing disabled people, then by all means, put in an adjustments process for when people come to interview with you. It should be there anyway to make life easier for them, to allow them to shine, to get the jobs, and then make sure you carry those adjustments forward. If you approach access to work, or your candidate approaches access to work from day one, then for the first 6 weeks, they are 100% funded, all the adjustments. After the 6 weeks, you are assessed on the size of your organisation and you may need to make a matched contribution. But if anybody wants to know, I can put a link to Access to Work. I may be able to put a link to Access to Work.
Does that apply for the actual recruitment process, Tracy?
No, not through the
That's what I'm talking about. I don't think you can get the same support. Yeah.
You can't, but literally as soon as they got the job offer and they've accepted, they can put in for the grant. So as a company, you make a decision about making adjustments. But let's face it, most adjustments to the recruitment process are for people, for example, with dyslexia, where you're giving them extra time. Or as we say, best practice would be to give people the questions and tests up front, because actually it shouldn't be an exam.
Yeah, we were talking about this, wasn't we? I'll be honest, I really struggle with this old-fashioned, frumpy
It's so
way of
unpleasant.
interviewing people where you can't have the questions in advance, because in real business, you go into your meetings having done your homework, you know? But in interview, it's not an interview, it's an exam. You know, it's the secret questions, and you've got to be ready for every single one right here, right now. Yeah, it's not really my bag. So under strategic for recruitment, I said about AI. So for instance, it says here, any AI, that's artificial intelligence solutions in use, not a fan, are selected with caution to ensure bias doesn't impact selection. So many things. I mean, for instance, you know, someone's got a facial disfigurement, if someone's maybe autistic and doesn't show their kind of feelings quite so visually, I mean, that's just one aspect to it. But there's so many things that AI can't read about a real human being. So I can't say
Stuttering's
don't.
another big one.
Yeah.
People of colour. If you've got black people on an AI, it can be prejudiced against them. That's the bottom line on it. And if you really want that,
I can't tell people not to use it. I will. No, I
you
can't tell
can.
people. But I honestly would. Well, I would steer away. But if you really have to, I don't know why you would. I would absolutely err on the side of caution.
I mean, I've been dealing with companies that employ 150,000 people around the world. They use real people and insist on using real people to interview real people. So if you can do it at that sort of size company, we can all do it. Sorry, AI companies, but unless you can get the bias out of your programming, it shouldn't be used. I
have to say, I say the same to my clients as well. And I find that most large companies absolutely do use real human beings. Yeah, I'm not sure who it is that's picked up on all this AI, but yeah, let's go with people.
We've got a question here from Kelly. I thought applicants could apply for a signed language interpreter to join them via a grant. Business Disability Forum also has great information.
Yeah, well, BDF does have some great information. Some of it you can access if you're not a member. As for the grant for the sign language interpreter, I'd be honest, if you want to share with me, I mean, feel free to share with everyone now, Kelly, but if you want to share with me where from, I'd be interested, because I know within the recruitment process itself, that it's really limited what help you can actually get.
Certainly once you've started work, you
definitely
get fully funded for hearing impairments or visual impairments are 100% funded by the government grants.
Any other questions?
We've got another question here. Here we go. Richard Bartlett, BSL is from Access to Work and the candidate needs to apply. So it's driven by the candidate rather than the company. That's true of all Access to Work, because Access to Work is a grant for the employee. So actually, effectively, you could take the kit with you when you leave if you had an ergo chair or something like that.
It's kind of ironic because it says Access to Work, so it should absolutely apply to candidates, right? But I do know the last time I looked at it, it was very limited to say the least. So that would be interesting. And I'll be honest, I'd need to refresh if they've actually now included the recruitment process within that. That'd be wonderful. But last time I looked, it didn't.
It doesn't. Okay, so any more questions that people have got? We've got about 10 minutes, I think.
So I'll just give a couple more examples while people can get their questions in. So just to finish basically through the levels as a couple more examples. So under enabling, which is level 4, it says here that all candidates are asked to confirm their preferred communication method with no method considered a standard. So things like that, the way you actually ask questions and the way you communicate from the off and being really explicit makes a world of difference. So for instance, if you say, we do this, but would you like something different? That isn't how I would deem true inclusion. If you ask the question of every single candidate, how can we most effectively communicate with you? You may give options. That is inclusion, because that is equitable for absolutely everyone. So that's another example.
I actually had a chat with a stutter who went and interviewed with a really large client, and he was trying to, one, hide the fact that he had a stutter, which he couldn't, but instead of him actually saying, can I write down some of the answers because it would be easier for me, or could I use a tablet or something? He felt that he couldn't. So it's really important in this process that you do open the doors to individuals and tell them that whatever they need, within reason, that you can do it for them.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, again, one of the reasons that you may determine that leader level isn't quite right for you, because it does take that extra work. Not giving you a cop out, but this is quite a big change for people. Is, for instance, here it says, under 5, leader, virtual tours of sites which provide an accurate representation are available in an accessible format for familiarization prior to arrival. That would make the world of difference to an awful lot of people, particularly people on the autism spectrum, because that familiarization adds to comfort and recognition and so on. Actually, it can help pretty much everyone, because let's be honest, first days at a new job can feel like first days at a new school and be quite daunting. So all of those things are why, you know, that takes you to that real leadership level. And particularly if you have shop face locations. So for instance, if you're a telecoms company and you may well have your actual stores that people can come to, is it obvious which counter they should go to speak to the right person? I don't know, maybe they've got 2,000 phones that they have to pass before they get in and it's all a bit overstimulating. So things like that can really help. Same with banks. And I know there's at least one bank that started looking at this stuff. But the same with banks, you know, you've got 3 counters when you go in, which one's for me? So things like that before you actually go can make a world of difference, but also for your staff, because you want them to have a really good experience from the off. And that is a whistle-stop tour, I know, in the time we've had of the maturity model. If there's anything else anyone wants to look at in the last 5 minutes, or I'd love to hear the rest of your questions, please keep them coming.
Right, I'm looking. We don't have any other questions at the moment. Jodie, what do you hope that people are going to take away from this whole session? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you've gone through there.
So what I hope, first of all, is that before they even download the model, they will absolutely go through the guidance, because it helps put your own mind into the right place. And also it helps remove some of that daunting feeling, because there is a lot of data here. I'm very aware of that. But you can kind of compartmentalize once it helps you to do that. So I'd say, first of all, is to go through the guidance for yourself. Secondly, absolutely download the model and have a play. You might not read it, you know, every single line of every, you know, all 10 business areas to start with, but that familiarization can really help. Ultimately, share it. You know, if you can get people on board from the other business areas, that is going to be a massive step in the right direction when you come to really look at your maturity as a whole organization. But let's be honest, it means that people need to gear up to it. It is going to take them some time to go through the assessment, to give a true reflection. And also because they'll know that there's probably actions coming out of this. What does that mean for them? You know, they've got a busy job, they've got a finite budget. How is this going to be managed? And so, you know, it's not to handhold to the point of getting out of it, but there is a bit of handholding in a sense of, as an organisation, making sure people are given the time, the bandwidth, and where it is necessary, the budget, to be able to actually see those actions through. Because if they can't do that, it can feel like a real thankless task.
So 2 questions I've got for you is, one, are you looking at these individuals finding an executive sponsor? And 2, should this sit with an ERG, an employee resource group, or should this be somebody from D&I? Who's going to pick up the baton first? So
typically, I tend to find with, I mean, obviously this model's fairly new, but with models in general, it tends to be the DEI team or lead that takes that kind of overall ownership, purely because someone needs to collaborate for the whole organisation, and it tends to sit there. Personally, I'm not a fan of employee resource groups having to take ownership of this stuff, because for the most part, ERGs are made up of volunteers with day jobs who already support the business, you know, heavily with a voice of the employees, with making sure that they can, you know, help to change to happen. So when this sits with them, not only does that add far more pressure to those volunteers and create an absolute second job, it then also feels like all of this, you know, pressure to improve is all a bottom-up approach again. It can always feel like it's all a push And if you're only pushing up and there's no push down, you can feel like you're hitting a head on a wall. I've been there. I did lead the network for 10 years. And if you've only got that bottom up approach, it can feel like you haven't really got the support of the organization. And if an organization wants to actually win for their own benefit, for all of their staff and all of their customers, then I'd love to see that leadership support is absolutely there. And maybe they do need some influence, because the reality is they're human beings too, and it may never have been brought to the table.
So how do you open that conversation?
Well, so there are so many ways. It depends on your organization. But absolutely, usually getting the ear of someone, so someone knows a leader well. You might even literally, if you've got a mentor, for instance, you might even ask the question, how do we, actually get this in? And this is why it's important. If you have got a DEI lead, I'd like to think they have a link into senior level, sort of C-suite or equivalent anyway. Because if they haven't, I feel like the organization's sort of missing a beat, because the top level don't know what's going on. But I think it is a case of literally breaking in. So you break in through who you know or what you know, but ultimately get it on the agenda. We've got over 500 organizations, well, I say over, but we've got 500 organizations now, for instance, signed up to the valuable community. Yeah. So it's meant to be there for them on the, board agenda. So get it on the agenda. If you're not part of the valuable community, so what? Get it on your agenda. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy for everyone to achieve that. If you do need help to do that, it's what we're here for. Love to be part of that. And on that note, actually, because you've taken the time to come today, because probably the easiest way to do that is actually if you tag me in your thoughts on LinkedIn, because it'd be good to be able to share a bit about what you thought about the maturity model. I will commit to giving your organization 2 hours of half price consultancy.
Wow.
Buy one, get one free. So that 2 hours can really be used as you see fit, to really help drive that. Because I'd really like to be part of your journey in any way, shape or form. But of course, the fact that you're using the tool, it's like, as I say, it's my proud baby.
That is a super generous offer, Jodie. It really is, because consultancy in this space can be very expensive. We look around and we see people charging 1,500-1,600 quid and actually doing very little for the money.
Don't tell my accountant, because he keeps telling me off for giving all the time away.
Well, listen, it's been an absolute delight having you on here. Apologies once more to everybody for the technical hitches that we've had along the line. Jodie is around on LinkedIn. You can always find her if you've got a quick question that you need answered. But the main thing, and I think the takeaway from all of this, is just use it. Use it. Have a look. Have a play around. You're not exposing yourself in any way. Nobody's going to run after you and go, they're going to try and sell you something. Nobody's storing your details. And I think I don't know whether you mentioned that actually, Jodie, but even if you register for the updates, that's not going anywhere that they're going to start marketing to you. However, I highly, highly recommend that you get in touch with Jodie to get the journey started. As you said, it's a fun, challenging, sometimes torturous, but such a worthwhile journey. And
so rewarding.
So much to everybody. And thank you, Jodie. Let's have you back again next time.
And thank you to everyone at Microlink who's helped today, because putting these things together does take time. So thank you so much.
Lovely. We'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.